Year 960, after chaos, the Song take power and choose order over ambition. Exams widen, records tighten, terraces rise, harvests double. Kaifeng on the Grand Canal turns grain into city life and night markets. This is where the Golden Age begins, and the same forces that power it will later strain it. Chapter 1. Golden Age begins. 960–1060. China wakes from storms of civil war. Borders shift less. Roads feel safe again. The year is 960. A soldier turned statesman, Zhao Kuangyin, takes the throne and becomes Emperor Taizu. His first promise is simple: make order stronger than ambition. Keep generals from making emperors. Put the sword under the brush. The new court reforms the chain of command. Governors rotate so no one builds a private kingdom. Military finance is audited. Garrisons answer to civilian officials. Glory is no longer measured by the size of a private army, but by the calm that follows it. A new habit forms: solve problems with ink before iron. To run a calmer state, the dynasty bets on talent. Civil service examinations widen. If you can read closely, argue clearly, and write concisely, you can serve. An exam hall becomes a ladder. Birth matters less. Skill matters more. Schools multiply. Tutors copy model essays late into the night. Families invest in sons who promise to turn paper into office and office into stability. With scholars in charge, the government learns to count. Household registers are updated, not ignored. Land surveys map fields and canals with care. Grain in and grain out are recorded in ledgers that must reconcile. Taxes stop being guesswork. A number paid today looks like the number expected tomorrow. That predictability is quiet power. It lets farmers plan and merchants risk. It builds trust, one line item at a time. Order brings food, and food brings people. From the south comes a gift: early ripening rice, often called champa rice. It resists drought, it matures fast. 2 harvests become normal. In good regions, a third is possible. Time itself bends to the farmer's calendar. Where hills once ran wild, terraces rise in green steppes. Villages dig canals and repair dikes together. Water is shared, not hoarded. Yields climb. Famine retreats a little. Surplus appears, and surplus changes everything. Surplus means choice. Some hands remain in the fields, now with better tools. Other hands learn craft. Iron plowshares, lacquered boxes, paper and ink. Porcelain, fired to a fine ring. Work diversifies. A rhythm appears. Farm to town, town to market, market to road, road to river, river to sea. The countryside feeds the city, and the city sends skill back to the countryside. The political heart beats in Kaifeng. Flat northern land spreads around it like a great table. Through the city runs the Grand Canal, an artificial spine that carries rice north and manufactured goods south. A barge that leaves the paddies can feed a capital. A crate of tools can ride the same waterway in the other direction. Logistics becomes a national strength. Officials dredge channels, repair locks, and standardize measures, so a pound in Kaifeng equals a pound in the south. When scales are honest, trade grows brave. Daylight in Kaifeng hums, streets specialize by craft. Paper shops in one lane, tea stands in another, metalwork in a third, where sparks jump and hammers ring. At dusk, the night market glows, lamps burn, and guards patrol. You can buy a bowl, a scroll, a bolt of silk, a sweet bun, and a rumor from a port you will never see. City life learns to breathe past sunset, and commerce learns to keep time. Printing scales words. Woodblocks turn rare manuscripts into goods you can buy. Cheaper pages mean more readers. More readers mean more clerks. More clerks mean a state that can actually run. Manuals spread techniques. How to graft a fruit tree, how to fire a kiln to steady a heat, how to weave tighter cloth. Knowledge that once hid in a master's memory now sits on a page. A craft becomes a process. A process becomes a standard. Behind prosperity, the money problem stirs. Copper grows scarce. Strings of coins are heavy and slow, and moving them across provinces is a risk. Deposit shops appear where a merchant can leave metal and carry a paper claim. Paper promises are easier to move, easier to hide, and easier to count. The full leap to government-backed paper money lies ahead, but the logic is already here. If the state can count, it can guarantee. If it can guarantee, it can speed the flow of value. Guilds and market officers draft rules. Contracts are witnessed, weights inspected, false measures punished. The government does not run every stall, but it sets the frame so stalls can thrive. A fair playing field is the cheapest stimulus. It asks only for referees who show up and scales that refuse to lie. Energy begins to shift. Charcoal forests thin under the appetite of kilns and forges. Eyes turn to coal, a darker stone with deeper heat. In this first chapter, the change is a murmur, not a shout, but the idea is planted. If you want more iron, you need more fire. If you want more fire, you need new fuel. The habit of substitution, wood for coal, muscle for water, guesswork for measurement, starts here. Engineers and artisans build around water. Water wheels turn steadily where rivers permit. Bellows breathe for hours without tiring. Trip hammers rise and fall with the patient pulse of a mill. Iron becomes less a miracle and more a schedule. When a workshop can rely on rhythm, it can promise delivery. When it can promise delivery, it can take bigger orders. Scale builds quietly out of minutes that run on time. Scholars watch the sky and count what they see. If the heavens keep order, perhaps the day can as well. Gears and escapements enter the imagination. The thought is simple and radical. Measure motion, divide it evenly, and you can share time between strangers. A city that agrees on hours can coordinate labor, shipping, and law. The famous clock will come later, but the need for it is born now, in crowded streets and full ledgers. Population climbs, 50 million, 60, then more in the century to come. More mouths, yes, but also more minds. Innovation loves density. Density loves food. Food loves water and time. The dynasty is learning to engineer both. When riverbanks are reinforced, floods still come, but they ruin fewer lives. When a granary buffers a drought, a village does not empty. When a tax is clear and stable, a farmer invests in a better tool. Stability is not a statue. It is a flywheel that stores momentum. Culture shifts with the economy. Poetry and painting flourish, but so do handbooks and account books. A good poem wins fame. A good ledger wins the winter. People begin to believe that next autumn will not betray them. That belief is the quiet engine of growth. It lets families spend on schooling, on tools, on repairs done before the roof collapses. It turns caution into confidence. Court debates sharpen policy. What interest rate prevents abuse yet keeps credit flowing? Which embankments need reinforcement before the monsoon? How many days of corvée can a village spare without starving? These are not epic questions. They are practical ones. Civilization is a stack of practical answers, updated when reality proves them wrong. There is fragility too. Success raises appetites. Cities want better tools. Armories ask for steel. Administrators need faster tallies. The money supply must keep pace with trade, or bottlenecks will choke growth. The woodlands cannot fuel every forge forever. Each solution points to the next problem, and meeting it in time is the art of rule. By the end of this opening phase, the outlines of a golden age are visible. Peace holds more often than it breaks. Exams refill the ranks with literate officials. Registers become reliable. Terraces climb hills. Canals stay open. Markets shine at night. Printing multiplies voices. Trust grows measurable. None of these feats is a victory parade. Yet together, they raise the ceiling of what a society can do. Mark the steps simply. A throne in 960 and a promise of restraint. The sword under the brush, talent over birth, numbers over rumor. Water guided by walls it can respect. Fields that pay twice for the same year of sun. Cities that buy and sell after dark without fear. A government that is dull when it should be dull and decisive when it must. From this foundation, the next leap becomes possible. Money can shed weight and gain speed. Furnaces can trade wood for coal. Iron can flow like a ribbon of fire. Time can be carved into regular slices by a tower that counts the night. Ships can point south and trust a needle. A market can coordinate strangers who never speak. All of that lives in the seed of this chapter. Order, surplus, and the will to measure. The Golden Age does not begin with a shout. It begins with a ledger that balances, a terrace that holds, a market that opens on time, and a boat that arrives when the contract says it will. It begins with a farmer who trusts that the tax will be what it was last year, and with a clerk who trusts the numbers on his page. It begins with habits that look small until you add them together. That is the Song promise in its first decades. A country stitched together by roads and records, a people fed by better grain and better water, a capital supplied by a canal that behaves like a vein, and a state that chooses patience over spectacle. Hold that picture. The next chapter will test it with money that turns to paper and machines that turn time into work. Chapter 2. Money and Machines. 1060–1120. Copper is heavy, slow, and scarce. By the late 11th century, the gap between what markets want and what copper can carry is obvious. Merchants are moving more goods over longer distances than strings of coins can handle. Deposit shops step in. A trader leaves metal on one counter and walks away with a paper promise he can redeem in another city. Drafts move faster than carts, safer than chests, easier than counting to the last cash coin in a crowded street. The state watches, counts, and copies. Regional authorities authorize notes with seals and deadlines. Paper becomes an official instrument, not just a private convenience. In places where coin shortages bite hardest, paper fills the arteries of exchange. A bundle that once needed a guard and a mule now slides inside a sleeve. Payments settle in days, not weeks. Taxes, too, can be tallied in lighter form, then converted when grain shipments arrive. But paper is power only if people trust it. Officials specify the size of a note, the pulp mix of the sheet, the ink, the serial marks, the penalties for forgery. Shops post rates, clerks check signatures, courts enforce claims when a debtor disappears. Money becomes a social contract printed in black and red. I will accept this because we all will. When that faith holds, trade accelerates. When it wobbles, markets cough. The Song learned to breathe on confidence. Counting improves alongside credit. Ledgers move from loose tallies to neat tables. Accounts reconcile monthly, then weekly. A merchant who knows his margins can offer thinner ones and still survive. He can price a shipment before it leaves port and hedge by sending a second in a different season. Information is not a whisper, but a sheet of numbers you can fold in your sleeve. Prices spread with print. Woodblock presses crank out almanacs, primers, manuals, and lists. What rice sold for upriver last week? What silk fetched in the capital? Which bridges were repaired and which roads are muddy? Print takes the rumors out of markets and turns it into reference. A shopkeeper who reads has an edge. A state that prints has reach. From money to metal, the logic is the same. Replace weight with flow. Charcoal cannot keep up with the appetite of foundries and kilns. Forests thin, hills look shaven. Coal steps forward. It is denser, hotter, and present where the north still holds seams close to the surface. Furnaces fed by coal, and in some places, refined into coke, run longer and hotter. Water wheels drive bellows. Cams lift and drop trip hammers that strike with the patience of a metronome. The output is not a miracle but a schedule. So much ore in, so much iron out, shift after shift. Iron changes hands, then changes lives. Nails cheap enough to use by the handful. Plowshares that hold an edge. Hinges that make a door swing true. Saw blades that cut straighter. A city built with iron fasteners rises faster and lasts longer. An army with standardized heads for spears and bolts trains quicker. A riverboat braced with iron fittings survives a hard landing and sails tomorrow. Ordinary strength becomes common, and common strength multiplies the work a society can do. The workshop itself learns rhythm. Instead of the fire roaring when wind is fair and tiring when arms are weak, the water sets a pace. Bellows inhale and exhale without rest. Hammers rise and fall more times in an hour than a pair of shoulders can manage in a day. When tools strike time, managers can promise delivery, and when they can promise delivery, they can accept larger orders. Scale does not need a speech, it needs a clock, so the scholars build one. In the capital, engineers and astronomers put water to work against gravity and gear. They count drips through regulators, turn a chain of wheels, drive a celestial model, ring bells, move figures. The tower is a machine that turns the sky into minutes. Its beauty lies in regularity. By dividing motion into equal parts, it teaches people to divide labor into hours. A city that shares time can share plans. A workshop that hears the chime at the same instant each day can change shifts, test batches, inspect output, and schedule repairs without guessing at the sun behind clouds. Printing and the clock feed back into each other. If a day can be sliced thin, a manual can say, stoke for this long, quench for that long, test at this interval, and mean the same thing across miles. The more widely rules can be printed, the more evenly they can be applied. Standards leave the temple of law and enter the furnace room. A mold used in Kaifeng matches a mold used in a smaller town because both were copied from the same diagram, printed in the same workshop, approved by the same board. The city absorbs these changes in its own way. Night markets grow more orderly because lamps are lit on a schedule. Guards change on a schedule. Deliveries arrive on a schedule. The sound of industry moves from irregular bursts to a hum. There is still color and chaos. Jugglers under lanterns, hawkers calling sweets, scholars arguing, but beneath the noise is a pulse that keeps returning to the beat. Paper money reshapes daily life in 100 small gestures. A craftsman pays his apprentices without counting coils of cash. A farmer buys a new plow without a bag clinking on his shoulder. A tax collector issues a receipt and the farmer keeps it, dry and flat, inside a bamboo tube. A widow selling tea by a bridge takes a note from a traveler she will never meet again and trusts it because the seal matches the one hanging in the magistrate's hall. Trust moves from face to form. With speed comes risk. Forgers carve blocks. Counterfeits spread. The state responds with new inks, new fibers, new seals, and harsh penalties. Occasionally, officials issue too many notes to cover deficits. Prices twitch. Markets test the paper's limits. These are the growing pains of a new medium. Each scare teaches a constraint. Redeem regularly, publish issuance, match paper to tax intake, make forgery expensive, and keep courts honest. Monetary policy becomes not what a ruler proclaims, but what a population believes after watching him behave. Coal carries its own hazards. Mines flood. Tunnels need shoring. Towns cough more in winter. Yet the pressure to shift fuel does not come from taste. It comes from math. If you need more iron than nearby woods can supply as charcoal, you must change the fuel or stop growing. The Song choose growth and then mitigate the cost where they can. Rotate cutting, police illegal kilns, dredge rivers to carry coal by boat instead of overland, and put forges near waterways to spread the smoke less densely. Printing pushes into homes. Cheap primers teach children the brush. Household encyclopedias collect recipes, home remedies, planting calendars, and legal basics. A literate household can read a contract, spot a bad rate, and keep a ledger. Literacy turns risk into calculation. Calculation turns fear into planning. Planning turns a thin surplus into a thicker one. Guilds adapt. They coordinate quality for distant buyers, pool funds to rescue a member after fire or flood, and lobby for stable taxes rather than special favors. In return, the state demands clear marks on goods, reliable weights in shops, and cooperation when price controls are needed after disaster. The bargain is public. We give you a stable field, you play a fair game. Alongside metal and money, glass and ink knowledge flowers, pharmacopoeias standardize doses. Calendars list eclipses and planting days with authority. Maps tie names to distances. When a mason says a beam should be this long, he can now point to a measure that exists beyond his own yard. Shared units make strangers less strange. All of these levers, paper, coal, water wheels, print, clock, do the same kind of work. They turn friction into flow. They replace bulk with symbol, muscle with mechanism, rumor with record, sun angle with counted beats. Each replacement frees some capacity that can be spent elsewhere, on a shop expansion, on a canal repair, on a second child's schooling, on a risk that might become a new craft. You can feel the economy accelerate without a single parade. Goods move more often because it is easier to pay. Tools get better because furnaces run hotter for longer. Advice spreads because it can be printed and understood at the same hour in two cities far apart. The Song do not invent the idea of efficiency, but they learn to compound it. Yet every solution sketches its own shadow. Paper allows corruption to hide in ledgers as well as flow through markets. Coal makes fire cheap and air dear. The clock that liberates production can also squeeze workers if owners demand the chime without mercy. The state that guarantees money must be stronger than any single minister's mistake. Strength brings resistance. These are the tensions that will matter when storms arrive. For now, the result is unmistakable. A society that can settle large exchanges with thin sheets, push iron output to meet civil and military demand, and coordinate work by time rather than weather. A country that prints its knowledge, gears its knights, and treats rivers as moving roads. The Song have built a machine that looks modern in spirit, if not in steel. The rise climbs higher because the parts now click together. Mark the arc simply. Credit becomes paper. Energy becomes coal. Force becomes water turned into motion. Knowledge becomes pages you can buy. Time becomes a public sound. When you add those conversions together, trade thickens, cities quicken, and the ceiling of possibility lifts. Hold this picture as we turn to politics and war. Bold reforms will try to steer this engine. Rivals will test its frame. Enemies will strike the places where paper is weakest, coal is hardest to move, and clocks cannot stop arrows. The age of money and machines sets the table. What comes next will decide who eats. Chapter 3: Reforms and Invasions, 1069–1140. The boom needs steering. Costs rise with armies, canals, and cities. In 1067, a new emperor takes the throne, and 2 years later, his chief minister, Wang Anxi, pushes a program that tries to turn prosperity into policy. The idea is simple. Use the state to smooth risk so farmers can plant more, merchants can move more, and the treasury can plan more. The state offers small loans at planting time, the Green Sprouts program, so peasants do not have to borrow from moneylenders at ruinous rates. It reorganizes local security under the Baojia system, so households share responsibility and petty crime drops. It replaces much corvée labor with paid service, so work is done by people who want the job and can be held to a standard. It builds public granaries and stabilizes prices, selling grain when it is scarce, buying when it is cheap. So famine becomes less of a market panic and more of a managed shortage. It standardizes transport contracts so grain and tax goods move on fair terms rather than on whatever a monopolist can squeeze. It expands schools and revises exams so more literate clerks can keep the machine honest. On paper, the machine hums. In practice, it grinds. Some officials enforce the loans like quotas. Some local bosses turn mutual responsibility into mutual bullying. Some granary managers skim grain and blame rats. When the state moves into markets, it must act faster and cleaner than the men it replaces. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it does not. The gains are real. Cheaper credit in many districts, steadier prices after poor harvests, better roads kept up by paid crews. But so are the frictions and the stories of abuse. Opposition hardens. Sima Guang and other conservatives argue that policy should be modest, justice predictable, and markets left to heal themselves. They fear that big programs create big temptations. They warn that the more the center promises, the more it must tax, and the more it must reach into village life, where trust is local and delicate. The court splits into new policies and old policies, not only as ideas, but as factions, with patronage, poetry, and prosecutions attached to each banner. Talent drains into party fights. Memorials read like legal briefs. Careers rise and fall with the wind. Politics swings like a gate. After the reforming emperor dies, a regency brings back conservative ministers and suspends many of the programs. When the young ruler comes of age, reforms return in softer form. A new emperor arrives with a taste for beauty and grand projects. Culture blossoms, but the books do not always balance. The rhythm becomes familiar. Enact, overreach, retrench, repeat. Meanwhile, the bills keep coming due for soldiers, riverbanks, embankments, arsenals, and the capital's appetite. Beyond the frontier, the map is moving. To the north, a new people rise in the forests and plains, hard cavalry, tight discipline, hungry for room. The Song court sees a chance. It makes a pact to attack an old rival together. The old rival falls. The new ally becomes the new threat. Cavalry crosses frozen rivers, moves fast, and tests cities whose walls are strong, but whose command chains are slow. In 1126, the enemy sits outside the capital. The court negotiates, pays, and buys time, then underestimates the appetite across the walls. The besiegers return with more men, more ladders, more intent. In 1127, they break the northern heart of the state. The palace is sacked. Catalogues become loot lists. Libraries become prizes. Workshops are stripped. 2 emperors are marched away with princes, princesses, artists, and engineers. The human capital of a century bundled into a caravan. This is remembered as the Jingkang disaster. The Northern Song is over. The dynasty does not vanish, it runs. A surviving prince becomes emperor in the south. The court moves by stages, first seeking shelter, then reaching safer water, and finally choosing a new capital in a river-laced country where canals knit towns like beads on a string. The refugees are countless. Farmers, bankers, potters, carvers, painters, cooks, whole guilds pick up their tools and carry their skills across the rivers. Loss and transfer happen at once. The north loses fields, mines, and the old centers. The south gains hands, recipes, styles, and demands. The treasury has to relearn the map. Tax registers for northern prefectures are worthless now. Border garrisons are gone. Income shrinks while defense costs surge. Paper money, already part of life, becomes central to fiscal survival. Issue too little, the army starves. Issue too much, prices shake. The lesson from Chapter 2 turns into a test. Money is confidence. Confidence depends on behavior, not slogans. On the rivers, the new court strengthens patrols and installs arsenals along the water. Forts become river forts. A fleet of war junks grows where land armies used to hold the line. Commanders famed for speed and discipline hit the invaders' supply lines, take back cities, and threaten a return to the lost river. Their banners swell hopes, songs celebrate them in markets, but triumph at the front collides with fear at the court. Ministers fear that success will pull the border back north and restart the tax and transport burdens that broke the old regime. They fear that a great general popular with soldiers will grow larger than the cabinet that pays him. Orders arrive from the capital, recording victories that might be possible but dangerous. Campaigns stop just as they near the old frontier. Treaties are drafted and redrafted. Tribute is weighed against pride. In the field, soldiers grumble. In the city, courtiers whisper. One hero is arrested on charges that history will dispute. By 1142, he is dead, a symbol for some of what was best in the army and to others of a risk the state dared not take. The message is clear. Survival now depends on boundaries the court can supply and defend, not on dreams of a map it can no longer feed. Faction fights do not end with flight. They sharpen under pressure. Some argue to concentrate on sea trade and river defense, to tax gently and grow the base again. Others want to rally the countryside and push north until the enemy breaks. The reform versus conservative divide gains a new axis, reconquest versus consolidation. Policy is not only about granaries and exams anymore. It is about which future to bet on. Yet even under siege, the administrative reflex holds. The court reopens schools, reprints statutes for the new jurisdictions, rebuilds archives from copies saved by careful men, and inventories the remaining granaries. It encourages merchants to bring in metals and salt by sea and to register ships, goods, and crews so tax can be taken and losses monitored. Insurance practices mature because risk is no longer an occasional storm, it is the weather. River pilots are certified. Bridge widths are standardized so military carts can pass. The old habit of measurement returns in new places. Industry adapts. With many northern ironworks lost, the south expands furnaces near ore and fuel. Maritime timber replaces northern pine in shipyards. Ports swell with rope makers, caulkers, and sail cutters. A city oriented to land routes learns to think like an island webbed by rivers and inlets. Armories reorder production. More crossbows for river decks, more armor sized for marines, more bombs carried by fast boats. The gunpowder recipes, refined in quiet decades, now echo on water. Culture does not stop, it pivots. Painters record the crowded boats and misty hills of the new capital. Poets grieve for the old north and discover the life of canals, bridges, and tea houses crowded with displaced families. Ceramic styles shift with new clays and new buyers. The court borrows sea wealth to fund mountain temples, then borrows again to pay troops. The gap between taste and capacity becomes a subject itself. What do the reforms look like after invasion? Smaller, sharper, more pragmatic. Price stabilization is limited by what grain the government can actually move. Loans are targeted to flood control and seed in regions where refugees have settled. The best parts of the old programs survive. Paid labor that shows up, schools that create clerks who can reconcile accounts, written standards that outlast ministers. The worst parts are shorn away by necessity, speculative trading by officials, coercive quotas disguised as relief, and elegant plans that rely on provinces the state no longer controls. By 1140, the new reality is set. The enemy holds the north. The court holds the lower Yangtze and the sea lanes it can reach. A treaty is close that will trade silver and silk for a line on a map and a piece long enough to plant orchards and launch ships. The dream of restoring the old borders is not dead, but it is no longer the plan that pays wages next month. The engine built in chapters 1 and 2 has been damaged and rebuilt, tuned to rivers and ports instead of plains and passes. Mark the arc simply. Big reforms try to make growth reliable. Factions tangle and slow the hand at the lever. A new northern power breaks the door. The dynasty survives by moving south, carrying skills and habits with it. Money becomes trust under stress. Armies become fleets. Industry follows fuel and ore to new hills. The government shrinks its promises to what it can deliver and writes them down so strangers can act on them. This chapter's lesson is not that reform failed. It is that reform without resilience snaps. The programs that worked were the ones that could be scaled down, audited, and taught to new clerks in new towns with the books burned and the keys lost. The rest became stories told by refugees while they waited for a barge. Chapter 4 will live in that new South, a maritime economy built on ports and contracts, a state that fights on rivers more than on steppe, and a fall that comes not from weakness alone, but from the weight of a world it had remade. Chapter 4: Southern Song and the Fall, 1140–1279. The dynasty lives, but it lives in the south. The court settles in Linnan, today's Hangzhou. Rivers and canals lace the land. Markets spill onto bridges. Refugees bring skills, recipes, and ledgers. Loss turns into labor. The base rebuilds. Sea trade becomes a backbone. Hangzhou swells into a superport. Shipyards cut keels day and night. Junks carry watertight bulkheads, sternpost rudders, and strong masts. A magnetic compass lies on a small tray, steady as a promise. Porcelain, silk, and tea move out. Pepper, aromatics, and silver move in. Foreign quarters grow along the docks. A judge can hear a case with translators on both sides and still close the books by sunset. Paper money tightens its grip. Southern issues, Huizi and others, turn payments light. Taxes are tallied faster than barges can arrive. When the treasury behaves, confidence holds and markets hum. When war costs rise and officials print ahead of receipts, prices twitch and merchants demand discounts. Monetary policy is no longer a theory. It is breakfast, rent, and wages. Industry adapts to the map. Ironworks rise near southern ore and fuel. Kilns ring river towns with a red night glow. Workshops run on water-driven bellows and trip hammers. Standards spread through printed diagrams and contracts. A tool ordered in linen fits a hinge cut upriver because both came from the same woodblock drawing. The clock's habit survives even if the famous tower is gone. Divide time, schedule labor, keep promises. Defense turns from walls on plains to forts on water. The frontier is the Yangtze and its lakes. The Navy matters more than ever. Paddle-wheel ships churn against the current. Trebuchets are mounted on decks. Gunpowder blends into bombs, fire arrows, and thunder crash grenades. In 1161, when northern cavalry cannot cross the river on speed alone, southern Song fleets win at sea. The message is simple. On water, the South can bite. Politics does not rest. Factions still argue. Peace for growth or war for pride. Light taxes to widen trade or heavy ones to build new armies. The court's memory is split. The North was lost by overreach. The North will only be returned by boldness. Ministers trade poems and charges. Careers rise and fall with policy wins. The government keeps schools open and exams running because clerks make the machine turn, even when ministers quarrel. The sea pays many of the bills. Customs officers measure hulls, weigh cargoes, and stamp papers. Merchants invest in bigger holds, safer routes, and insurance funds, shared risk written into guild rules. A captain can lose a ship to a storm and not lose his house because 20 peers promise to absorb the blow. Sophistication grows from necessity, but the world beyond the horizon is changing. To the north, the Jin state that once broke the Song weakens under new pressure. A new force gathers on the steppe and in the forests. The Mongols learn to take cities as well as run horses. They batter the Jin until in 1234, the north changes hands again. The Song help, hoping to recover old ground. The reward is a stronger neighbor with longer reach. At first, rivers and fleets keep the danger far away. Then the frontier moves south by siege, not by charge. The key is the twin cities of Xiangyang and Fancheng on the Han River, gates to the Yangtze Basin. From 1267 to 1273, the siege tightens. Southern sorties break some lines, but supply is a long road, and the enemy learns quickly. Counterweight trebuchets, new models brought by engineers from the west, throw heavier stones farther and faster. City walls that once shrugged off ladders now crack under a measured rain. When Xiangyang falls, the river opens. The enemy can ride ships down the waterways the Song once treated as moats. Fort after fort must now fight both current and catapult. The Navy still wins battles, but it cannot be everywhere. Each defeat costs trained crews the state cannot replace in time. Each retreat hands over stores measured in ledgers that will never reconcile. Finance strains under the weight. More paper is issued. Some is redeemed on time, some waits too long. Salt and tea monopolies are tightened. New taxes are tried. Old taxes are raised. Corruption finds the gaps. The market tolerates stress, then resists. Prices for grain and oil jolt with each rumor from the front. Confidence becomes a battle line inside the capital. In 1276, Linan surrenders. The court submits to spare the city. A child emperor is taken. The dynasty is declared finished by the conqueror's pen. But loyalists refuse the book's last page. The war goes to sea and south. A small court forms around two young princes. Fleet officers swear to keep the line alive, while a ship still floats. What follows is courage stretched thin. Admirals juggle convoys, refugees, and supply. Forts on promontories become last leaves on a bare branch. Each month, a few more towns switch flags, sometimes quietly, sometimes with fire. The court's seal sits on a table that rocks with the tide. Proclamations travel by sail. In 1279, the fleets meet at Yamen, off the coast of Guangdong. The Southern Song lash their ships together to resist boarding and fire. It makes a wall, it also makes a trap if the line breaks. Wind and flame turn the tight formation into a narrow world of smoke, arrows, and splinters. Ammunition runs low, water runs out. Crews fight with poles and hooks, then with hands. Ministers burn the archives they can reach. Mothers hide children below deck. The last emperor is a child. When defeat is certain, a loyal minister takes the boy in his arms and leaps. The dynasty ends in deep water, not in a throne room. The conquerors write a new calendar. The survivors write letters, manuals, and poems. Many work for the new rulers. Many do not. The southern economy does not vanish. Ports and kilns still have customers. Rivers still carry grain, and shops still open at dawn. But the old name is gone. The map wears new colors. What remains after the fall is larger than the flag. Paper money as practice, not rumor. Maritime trade at continental scale. Printed standards for tools and contracts. A navy that could fight by clock and catapult. Gunpowder as a family of recipes, not a single trick. An exam-run bureaucracy that could be rebuilt from copies when originals burned. The habit of measuring, scheduling, and auditing work. The belief that logistics is power. Why did it fall? Strengths had limits. Rivers cannot defend mountains. A navy cannot hold farmland alone. Paper needs discipline. The court could not always keep under siege. Factions wasted time the enemy did not waste. The South's engine was real, but it was tied to geography and to a political class that often feared its own generals more than its foes. Mark the arc simply. Consolidate on rivers. Prosper on the sea. Pay with paper. Fight with fleets. Lose the hinge at Xiangyang. See the river. Become a road for the enemy. Watch the capital surrender. End at Yamen. And yet, keep the techniques that made the rise possible. Because other dynasties will use them again. The story closes where it began, with levers that turned time into production. The song showed how to stack them. Food, finance, machines, markets, and rules, until a society feels modern. They could not keep the map. They did shape the method. That method outlives the dynasty that proved it. The song learned to turn time into work. Double harvests, honest ledgers, paper money, coal-fired iron, printed standards, clocks, and ships that followed a needle. Those levers built prosperity and pressure. Factions split, allies flipped, sieges learned new math. Rivers that guarded became roads for invasion. Paper needed discipline the court couldn't keep. The map fell, the method stayed. Measure, standardize, schedule, and move. Like the video and subscribe for more. Follow for more clips on Shorts. Comment what you want next.